Welcome back to Napier-Looby's Bar Association's Black History Month Spotlight Series. This is a series where we're honoring the people who have paved the way for Napier-Looby members and those who continue to contribute and carry out the mission of Napier-Looby. On this episode, we have the honor and the privilege of speaking with someone who needs no introduction on his own, but he's Judge Monte Watkins. He has a long storied career here in Nashville, and he's been very instrumental to Napier-Looby's success. So we're just really excited to have him here and to highlight his contributions that he's made not only to Napier-Looby, but the greater Nashville community as a whole. So without further ado, thank you, Judge Watkins, for being here. It's an honor and privilege to have you here and to be able to talk with you and talk a little bit about who you are, what you've done in the community, and just kind of talk about Black history in itself. So to get us started, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what your career has looked like over the years, and how you got connected to Napier-Looby.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I feel privileged to be able to come and speak with regard to Napier-Looby and Black history. I was born in Memphis, grew up in a neighborhood called Scudderfield, which is in North Memphis, which is one of the poorest neighborhoods in Memphis, and still is, which obviously means I grew up poor, but I was a happy kid, so don't think that I was depressed or anything. I was not. We just didn't have much. But one thing about it, I went to the same school 1st through 12th grade, and I still have friends from back 1st grade, as well as even kindergarten. And we still get together periodically. And I enjoyed my childhood very much. One thing I wanted to do, though, and I always wanted to do, was go to college. I didn't know how I was going to go, how I was going to pay for it, but I was determined that I would, in fact, go to college, and I did attend Tennessee State University. After graduating from undergrad, I went to graduate school at Tennessee State, and received both bachelor's and master's in psychology, and after that I went to work in mental health. And I worked with kids primarily for about 5 years in mental health. And then it really dawned upon me that, hey, although I enjoy this is not where I want to continue to go. So I left mental health, and I bounced around different other places. I did real estate, investment management, retail sales, teaching, house painting, and a number of other different things for the next 5 years, then decided to go to law school at the ripe old age of 34. And I went to North Carolina Central University School of Law. And while I was there, I was focused on becoming a real estate attorney because I had been in the real estate business. I was never going to be a litigator. I was never going to the courtroom, none of that, until I actually graduated and started practicing. One of my undergraduate classmates who had been practicing for a few years, he asked me to join his office, and I did. And he said, well, you're going to have to take what you can get when you come here. And I said, okay. So I started taking whatever cases came in the door. And after about a year, criminal cases started coming up. And I told him that I really didn't want to do that, but he said, you really need to. So I started doing criminal cases, and I found out I actually enjoyed criminal practice more than I did civil practice. So I did criminal and civil for all of my years as a solo practitioner. But at the beginning of practice, Napier-Looby was actually reestablishing itself. At that time, there were probably only about 40 or 50 African-American lawyers in Nashville. So we pretty much knew each other, but we didn't have a chance to get together and mingle and socialize and exchange ideas with one another. And so several people said, hey, let's get Napier-Looby going again. And so we started it back up, and virtually everybody was involved. Some of the older lawyers were not, but all of the younger lawyers and middle-aged lawyers all began to participate in Napier-Looby, and we saw it as a great opportunity for, as I mentioned, to socialize, but to exchange ideas, to get advice, to help each other's careers, And, you know, at that time, African American lawyers were pretty limited in what they could do. Things started to change a few years later, but we were pretty much limited. Either you went into private practice, or you became a public defender, or if you may be able to get into the district attorney's office. They only had 1 or 2 assistant DAs and probably 4 or 5 public defenders. So your other option was, well, you could work for the state of Tennessee. That was another option, or private practice. And so I became involved in Napier-Looby. I enjoyed it very much. Started taking some leadership roles, and in 1992, I was elected president. Served 92, 93 as president of Napier-Looby, which was some work, I might add. And back then, we didn't have emails and texts and voicemail. So I had to write letters every day. I mean, every single day I was writing letters, snail mail, I might add. And my assistant, I think she did more work on Napier-Looby than she did on legal work, because I had to use her to communicate with everybody in Napier-Looby. But I really enjoyed it. I was very much involved and continued to be involved for a number of years. And then as I got older, I kind of drifted away a little bit. But Napier-Looby was very influential to me, and it was a great place to be for particularly African American lawyers.
Well, that's interesting. I love that you brought that out, because when you said about the snail mail, I never thought about that. I said, I'm not going to ever complain again about having to send all this correspondence out. You're having to actually handwrite it. But one of the things, and I know you said that you're very active then, but I still consider you an active member and a supporter of Napier-Looby. You still come to stuff, you still give advice. So what has sustained you still being not someone who just had their time in the past, but also support those of us who have come after you? So what's the drive that keeps you coming back and supporting?
You know, my second or third year of law school, the National Bar Association president came to our campus, and he approached me, as he did many others, and said, I want you to join the NBA. And I said, you know, as soon as I graduate and get on my feet, I will. 3 years after I started practice, I was able to join the NBA and attend my first conference in 1987, and I was completely blown away by my experience with the National Bar Association. Fell in love with it. I'm a life member, Hall of Fame member, past chair of the Judicial Council. So my connection with the National Bar Association is very much connected with my association with Napier-Looby. As everybody well knows, Napier-Looby is a division or affiliate of the National Bar Association. So that's primarily how I've maintained contact, is through the National Bar Association and Napier-Looby. I just love being a part of those organizations.
And when you look back, what would you say has been, what purpose has most defined your journey? So in other words, what has motivated you to show up in your career and in your community? And I know you didn't talk much about it when you gave your background, but you were a criminal court judge as well.
Right. Yes.
So what would you say is your motivation or your why?
Well, service to others. That's basically it. And I may touch on that a little bit later, but I believe in helping others. You know, when I started out, I struggled mightily. I mean, when I came to college, I didn't have any money, except a few dollars in my pocket. I didn't have any assistance. I didn't have anywhere really to turn. And so I struggled greatly. But again, I was determined. And because of my struggles, I always said that, you know, when I get in a position, I'm going to do what I can to help other people. And that's what I've done. I've served others. In practice, I served as a mentor. I was able to speak to a number of groups, particularly young people, as a criminal court judge, of course, I did the same kinds of things, being a mentor, having interns on the undergraduate level, high school level, law school level, and helping people. Now, in practice, I did a lot of work for people who really couldn't afford legal services. Although I was a part of the legal aid pro bono committee, but I also just individually decided I would do as much as I could to help people who came to see me for legal services. Wouldn't charge them much. A lot of times I wouldn't charge them anything because I believed in helping other people get in a place in their lives where they felt comfortable. And particularly when it came to legal matters, and I had the little skill that I had to help them, and so I did. And I continue to do service to others. That's my purpose in life, is serving other people.
I love that. There's a popular quote, I think it's attributed to Shirley Chisholm: service is the rent we pay for the privilege of living on this earth.
Well, and Muhammad Ali also said, service to others is the rent we pay for our rooms here on earth. That's one of his quotes. So he and Shirley Chisholm had the same idea, and I often quote Ali because he was my hero. So I use that quote quite a bit. I used it just recently when I spoke somewhere, but service to others. Oh, I was speaking at a fundraiser for the Judicial Council, and I used Ali's quote. Again, I will also attribute it to Shirley Chisholm, who was the first African-American female congresswoman in the United States, which was a great accomplishment, and the first serious candidate, African-American female candidate for president of the United States. So looking at her and Ali, that's a plus, a big plus in my life.
And both of them are giants in history.
Oh, yeah.
Not just Black history, but history. Well, we know Black history is American history anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of Black history carries both legacy and responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
How would you say Black history has shaped your perspective, like your why, or the ways you've navigated advocacy or the legal profession in general?
Well, I have over the years studied, read, talked about, discussed those who came before us. And that's our Black history, our ancestors, those who made the struggles, the Paul Robesons in life, all of the other people who paved the way for folks like us, the Thurgood Marshalls in life. You know, he probably had one of the greatest influences on African-American lawyers back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, because he was that one lawyer that all African-American lawyers knew was at the top of his game. As a practitioner, he won most of his cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, and he eventually served as a Supreme Court justice. So he was a hero. People like Johnny Cochran, another great litigator who motivated a lot of lawyers. So I look back on those ancestors, those people who came before us, whose shoulders we stand on, who made the sacrifices and the struggles so that I could be where I am and you could be where you are. So our history is rich and plentiful, and it's a great history that I am very proud of, and I try to give that information to younger people so that they can understand that they are not here just out of the blue. They are here because others came before them and paved the way for them.
That's exactly right. I would not be sitting here but for other members who've gone before me in Napier-Looby, who navigated and worked hard so that Black attorneys could be in a majority firm or just be in the legal field in general. And I think to fully understand and appreciate where we are now, we have to look back to those who paved the way before us.
Oh, absolutely. And two of the first African Americans at this firm, Billy Sanders and Waverly Crenshaw, were active members of Napier-Looby back in those days, and that's when that was before they even came to work at this firm. They worked at commission, one of the state commissions, and then eventually got hired. Because when I started practicing in 1984, there were only two African Americans at major firms. Cyrus Booker was at Dearborn and Ewing, and there was a gentleman at Bass Berry. I can't remember his name, but those were the only two out of the 50 or so of us in the city who worked at major firms. And then things started to happen a few years later with Waverly and Billy, and then others came along, and now most of the firms have African American lawyers. Some have quite a few African American lawyers, and so it's been a road that I am proud of with respect to those who were able to lead the way for younger lawyers like you.
Yes, definitely. And it's important to sit down and have these conversations, because while I knew about Judge Crenshaw and Billy, I didn't know about the two individuals who were at the other firm. So I think that's why it's important for the generations to connect and talk, because there's just so much history and knowledge that can be imparted to us. So as you think about your journey, was there ever a defining moment or a lesson or even a mentor that left a lasting impression on you that kind of helped shape who you are?
Yes, there were a number of defining moments, but I think I would just point out primarily two mentors. First and foremost, my mother. She provided the moral character for me. She was the one who always kept me on the right path within our household. Outside of our household, there was a childhood friend who was a couple of years older than I am, Obie Hunt. Obie, if he saw me kind of slip away a little bit, he would say, "Hey, you know better than that. You need to straighten up." And I listened to him because I respected him. And I would get back on the right path. As a matter of fact, about a month and a half ago, he and I had a telephone conversation. He lives in Detroit. He retired from Chrysler Corporation many years ago. And he and I spoke for about an hour and a half, because we hadn't talked in about 20 years. But he was a strong influence outside of my home. Inside of my home, as I mentioned, my other influence was my mother. There were a number of different moments in my life, defining moments. There are so many of them, it's hard to even begin to say. One moment, I'll tell you this, back in 2003, I was approached by now Judge Jim Todd, who said, "You know, the legislature has just funded 2 criminal courts. You ought to apply for one of them." And I said, "Well, Jim, I don't know. I'll have to think about it." Now, the reason I said that is I had been approached for about 2 or 3 years by different lawyers to seek a judgeship, and I was extremely reluctant because I didn't want to be in the spotlight, so to speak. So I had rejected doing anything about it, but at that moment in time, a number of things had happened right within that time frame. And so I said, as I mentioned, I said to Jim, let me think about it. And I thought about it for a couple of days, and I gave it some serious thought. Then I said, yes, I think it's important that I at least attempt to apply for the judgeship. I did, and fortunately, because of all of the bridges that I had built over the years, and the support that I had, I was appointed by the governor. And so that was a big moment in my life, big moment.
So on the other side of it, was there anything that really makes it all worth it on the other side of it. Even though back then you didn't want to be on the spotlight, now that you have gone on and served as a criminal court judge, do you look back and say, I'm glad I did that?
Oh, absolutely. I'm gonna tell you one of the reasons I say that. Almost every week, and when I'm out and about, I am stopped by people who have appeared in my court. And they will say to me, I am so glad that I appeared before you because you treated me right and you set me on the right path in life. And I have had some to even tell me that I saved their lives. A couple of years ago, I was walking into a store and I spoke to this young man, and then he looked at me and he said, "You're Monte Watkins." I said, "Well, maybe." He said, "Judge Watkins." I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "You saved my life." And he told me about his experience. He ended up having to go to prison for a couple of years, but after that experience, he turned his life around. He got out of prison, he went to college, graduated from college, so he's doing well. And I get that from so many different people who give me positive reactions wherever I am, whether I'm in Home Depot or the airport or in a restaurant or wherever I am. I always run into people who have had contact with me when I was on the bench, and they tell me how fair I was, which is what I always tried to do, was be fair. But also, while on the bench, I had observed over the years how a number of judges did not give people second chances. And I said, if I get in a position, I'm going to give second chances when I can. And sometimes third and fourth chances, quite honestly. Because I know people who get into difficulty, that is, violate the law, they often have trouble following the rules. And it takes them 2 or 3 stumbles before they get back on their feet. So I didn't want to take the line that I've heard some judges say, well, when I put people on probation, I tell them, if you violate my probation just one time, I'm going to place your sentence into effect. And I know judges who do that. And I was like, well, they don't understand the person. You have to understand the psychology of an individual who has difficulty in life. He or she usually is not going to be able to straighten up just overnight. Mm-hmm. They take a lot of prodding and pushing before they get in a position where they say, okay, it's time for me to straighten up and do right. So that's why I would give second and third, and as I said, sometimes fourth chances. Now, if somebody was a murderer or a rapist, well, they don't get those second and third chances, but most others do. And so I strongly believed in that, and I followed that. And I wanted to, and I think I have helped a lot of people straighten out their lives because of that.
And I think that's the true definition of using our power and our influence
Mm-hmm.
for good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what it sounds like you did.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even that you're retired, people years later are coming back and saying, hey, you changed my life. And that's what a lot of people need sometimes. It's just somebody to listen to them, to their story,
Mm-hmm.
who understand that, yeah, this person may be here for one reason, but they have a whole host of other factors that are playing into it, and to just give them a chance.
Yeah, and one of the things that really helped me, I might point out, I interrupted you, and I apologize for that, but it's my background in psychology. As I mentioned, I have an undergraduate and graduate degree in psychology, so I have a somewhat decent understanding of human behavior. And I used that training to also develop an understanding of African American psychology, because our psychology is a little different, because we live in a different culture. And so I have a fair understanding, I'm not saying a great understanding, but a fair understanding of the psychology that motivates people, that causes people to do what they do.
Yeah, that's important. That's
Mhm.
important. So we talked about your history, your career, the ways you've influenced or used your career for good. So what's something about you that people may not know? Any special hobbies or interests that we wouldn't know about from looking at your resume?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. First of all, I'm a gardener. I grow, now I used to grow a lot of different stuff, but now I just grow peppers because I make hot sauce.
Oh,
And I give it all away.
really?
I make hot sauce throughout the year, and I give it away to many different people. So I love gardening. I started doing it actually just before I started law school. About 2 years before I started law school, I started gardening, and I've continued to do it all of those years. So that's been over 45 years. When I was growing up, I had an uncle who was a carpenter and plumber. And he would often call upon me to help him on little jobs that he had. He worked for himself, so he didn't work for a company or anything. And so he worked primarily in the neighborhood when people had problems with their plumbing or carpentry or those kinds of things. And he would always call me to help him. And I would, and I learned a lot about plumbing, a lot about carpentry, a lot about painting, all of which I still do today at my house, nowhere else. Maybe my daughter's house, I'll help her out. But so those are a couple of things. My gardening, I love yard work. I do that all the time, and I love building things. Woodworking, and so those are a couple of things that are not on my resume.
Yeah, those are interesting and good skills to have too, especially gardening. So that's interesting. So in wrapping up, as someone who has paved the way for younger generations, tell us, what does legacy mean to you?
Well, legacy means to carry on, really. To carry on the good deeds that those before you started. To me, that's what legacy means. But the advice that I try to give to young lawyers and young people in general is this. First and foremost, always be honest and practice integrity. Those two things are vitally important no matter what profession you're in. Honesty and integrity. But also I add to that, whatever you do in life, build bridges. Don't burn bridges. Those people who burn bridges generally don't end up doing that well. Build bridges, build coalitions. You know, in the legal profession, we are in a profession where we fight with our opposition. But, you know, I fought with my opposition all the time. But it was a fight for the work that I was doing. I didn't fight the individual. I respected the individual. So when we left the courtroom, I was friends with him. There's a retired assistant district attorney general who I tried, God, I can't even remember how many murder cases against her. But we became close friends. And although we were on opposite sides of the courtroom, we became close friends because I believed in building bridges. As a matter of fact, when I applied for my judgeship, she was one of the individuals who came and spoke on my behalf. So building bridges, honesty, and integrity. You can't go wrong with those things. Always remember that.
That's good. I will keep that with me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Judge Watkins, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and to learn more about your background. So thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I feel privileged to be called upon to come and speak on such a wonderful occasion. Thank you.